The stage lights blazed so hot that Sarah Martinez could feel sweat already forming on her palms as she stood in the narrow corridor behind the main stage of the Philadelphia Civic Arena. Through the thick curtains, she could hear the muffled roar of 12,000 people, their voices blending into a wall of sound that made her knees weak. This was it. After 3 rounds of auditions, countless sleepless nights, and a journey that had started 6 months ago on a whim, she was about to step onto the stage of America's biggest talent competition. But as she clutched her guitar case with trembling fingers, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she had made a terrible mistake. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah had never planned to be here. At 26 years old, she spent her days stocking shelves at a big box store in South Philadelphia, her hands arranging products in perfect rows while her mind wandered to melodies she would never share with anyone. The guitar in her case was 15 years old, a gift from her late grandmother who had seen something in young Sarah that nobody else noticed. Back then, she had dreams of playing music that mattered, of writing songs that could make people feel something real. But dreams didn't pay rent, and they certainly didn't help when her younger brother needed her support after their parents passed away in a car accident when she was 19. The waiting area backstage was crowded with other contestants, each one seeming more confident than the last. There was a dance crew stretching in perfect synchronization, their matching outfits gleaming under the fluorescent lights. A magician practiced card tricks in the corner, his hands moving with practiced ease. A young opera singer vocalized nearby, her voice soaring effortlessly through scales that would have intimidated professional musicians. Sarah felt like an imposter among them, just a girl with an old guitar and songs she had written in the stockroom during her lunch breaks. Marcus, her younger brother, had been the one to push her into this. He had found videos she had secretly recorded on her phone, songs she had written late at night when the world was quiet and she could let her guard down. Without telling her, he had submitted one of those recordings to the show's open call. When the acceptance email arrived, Sarah had stared at it for 3 days before finally deciding to go through with the first audition. She told herself she was doing it for Marcus, to show him that taking chances was possible. But deep down, a small part of her wondered if maybe, just maybe, this could be her moment. The first 2 audition rounds had been held in smaller venues, with just the producers and a handful of staff members watching. Sarah had barely made it through, her voice shaking so badly during the first round that she had to stop and start over twice. But something in her songs, something raw and honest, had convinced them to keep her moving forward. Now she was here, in the live semifinals, about to perform in front of millions of television viewers and a panel of judges whose opinions could make or break careers with a single word. A production assistant with a headset and clipboard approached her, his expression professionally cheerful. "Sarah Martinez, you're up in 5 minutes. Do you need anything? Water? A moment alone?" Sarah shook her head, not trusting her voice to work properly. The assistant gave her an encouraging smile and moved on to check on the other contestants. 5 minutes. 300 seconds. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to remember why she had written the song she was about to perform. It had come to her during a particularly difficult shift at work, about 6 months before Marcus found her recordings. A customer had yelled at her for 20 minutes about a price discrepancy of $3, berating her in front of other shoppers until she felt smaller than the products she stocked. When she finally got home that night, exhausted and humiliated, she had picked up her guitar and the words had poured out. The song was about invisible people, the ones who society looked past, the ones who served and cleaned and stocked but were never really seen. It was about holding on to dignity when the world tried to strip it away. She had titled it Still Here. Through the curtain, Sarah could hear the host wrapping up the previous act, a comedy duo that had the audience roaring with laughter. Their performance was polished, professional, exactly the kind of thing that made good television. Sarah felt her stomach drop. What was she thinking, following an act like that with a slow, emotional song about working retail? The audience would be bored. The judges would hit their buzzers before she finished the first verse. She would become one of those viral clips people shared to laugh at, the awkward contestant who thought she was better than she actually was. A stage manager appeared, gesturing for her to move closer to the entrance. "This is it," he said, his voice businesslike but not unkind. "Remember, when you hear your name, walk straight to the mark on the center stage. The judges will talk to you first, then you'll perform. Try to relax and be yourself." Sarah nodded mechanically, shouldering her guitar case and moving into position. Through the gap in the curtain, she could see the massive stage stretching out before her, the judges' table to the left, and beyond that, an ocean of faces rising up into darkness. The host's voice boomed through the arena speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, our next performer comes to us from right here in Philadelphia. She works at a retail store during the day, but tonight, she's hoping to show us that there's more to her story. Please welcome Sarah Martinez." The curtain pulled back and Sarah stepped out into a wall of sound and light. The applause was polite but not overwhelming, the kind of reception given to an unknown quantity. She walked to the mark on the stage, her boots feeling heavy against the polished floor. The distance to the judges' table seemed impossibly far, yet she reached it in what felt like seconds. Behind the table sat 4 judges, each one a legend in their own field. On the far left was Victoria Stone, a pop superstar whose albums had defined a generation. Next to her sat David Chen, a music producer who had discovered and shaped dozens of successful artists. Then came Rachel Morrison, a songwriter whose lyrics had moved millions. And finally, Marcus Webb, a former rock musician known for being the harshest critic on the panel, the one whose buzzer everyone feared. They all looked at Sarah with expressions of polite curiosity, waiting to see what she would do. Victoria spoke first, her voice warm but professional. "Hello, Sarah. Welcome to the show. Tell us a little about yourself." Sarah's mouth felt dry as she leaned toward the microphone. Hi. I'm Sarah Martinez. I'm 26 and I work at a discount store in South Philadelphia." She paused, unsure what else to say. The silence stretched out awkwardly until David Chen jumped in. "And what are you going to perform for us tonight?" Sarah swallowed hard. "I'm going to sing an original song. It's called Still Here. I wrote it about 6 months ago." Marcus Webb leaned forward, his expression skeptical. "An original song? That's ambitious for this stage of the competition. Most contestants play it safe with covers. What made you decide to take that risk?" Sarah felt her face flush. "I just wanted to perform something that felt true to me. Something real." Webb sat back, his arms crossed. "All right then. Show us what you've got. But I'll warn you now, I have very high standards for original material. If it's not exceptional, I won't hesitate to stop you." The other judges shot Webb annoyed looks, but he didn't seem to care. Sarah felt her hands shaking as she moved to the stool that had been set up for her at center stage. She carefully removed her guitar from its battered case, the instrument looking shabby under the bright stage lights. She had saved for months to buy new strings, but there had been no money left for anything else. The guitar's body was scratched and worn, the finish dulled by years of use. Next to the expensive instruments she had seen other contestants carrying, it looked like something from a thrift store. As she settled onto the stool and positioned the guitar, Sarah could feel the weight of thousands of eyes on her. The audience had grown quieter, but not in an anticipatory way. It was more like polite waiting, the kind of silence people gave to something they expected to be mediocre. She adjusted the microphone stand with trembling hands, the metal cold against her fingers. This was the moment. She could either play it safe, rush through the song and hope to get off stage quickly, or she could give everything she had and risk complete humiliation. Sarah closed her eyes for just a moment, blocking out the judges, the audience, the cameras. She thought about her grandmother, who had pressed this guitar into her hands and told her that music was the only honest language in the world. She thought about Marcus, sitting somewhere in the audience, believing in her even when she didn't believe in herself. She thought about every person who had ever made her feel invisible, and every time she had almost given up on the idea that her voice mattered. Her fingers found the first chord. It was a simple open position, nothing fancy or technically impressive. But the way she struck it, the intention behind it, made it resonate through the arena in a way that cut through the ambient noise. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The sound hung in the air for a long moment, pure and clear. Then, before she could second-guess herself, Sarah began to sing. Her voice started soft, almost fragile, but there was something in it that made people lean forward in their seats. The first verse was about waking up before dawn, putting on a uniform that smelled like defeat, and walking into a job where nobody knew your name. Sarah's voice carried the weight of every early morning, every aching foot, every forced smile at a customer who treated her like furniture. But there was no self-pity in her delivery, only a quiet strength, a refusal to be broken. As she moved into the second verse, something shifted in the arena. The polite attention became genuine focus. People stopped checking their phones. The judges' expressions changed from professional courtesy to actual interest. Then came the moment that would change everything. Sarah had written a bridge into the song, a section where the melody lifted and the message transformed from personal struggle to universal defiance. She had practiced it hundreds of times in her tiny apartment, but never in front of anyone. As she approached it now, she felt a surge of something she had never experienced on stage before. It wasn't confidence exactly, but rather a kind of surrender, a letting go of fear and embarrassment and self-consciousness. Her voice, which had been controlled and careful, suddenly opened up. The note she hit on the word here in the bridge soared across the arena, raw and powerful and completely authentic. It wasn't a perfect pop star note, polished and produced. It was real, carrying every bit of pain and hope and determination that Sarah had lived through. The guitar chord underneath it rang out like a declaration. "I'm still here," she sang, and the words weren't just about survival anymore. They were about refusing to disappear, about demanding to be seen. In the judges' section, Marcus Webb's hand, which had been hovering near his buzzer, froze. Victoria Stone's eyes widened. David Chin leaned forward, his professional mask slipping to reveal genuine surprise. Rachel Morrison's mouth opened slightly, her songwriter's ear immediately recognizing something special happening. The audience, which had been merely polite before, began to wake up. A ripple of energy moved through the arena as people realized they were witnessing something unexpected. Sarah didn't notice any of it. She was lost in the song now, her fingers moving across the fretboard with a confidence that came from years of private practice. The second chorus hit even harder than the first, her voice gaining strength with each line. She sang about all the people who had been overlooked, all the dreams that had been postponed, all the voices that had been told they didn't matter. And with every word, she reclaimed a piece of herself that she had hidden away to survive. The production crew backstage had stopped their usual hustle to watch the monitors. The other contestants in the waiting area had gone silent, drawn to the speakers broadcasting Sarah's performance. Marcus, sitting in the audience, had tears streaming down his face, his hands gripped together so tightly his knuckles were white. He had known his sister was talented, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. This was transformation happening in real time. As Sarah moved into the final verse, her voice dropped back down to something more intimate, drawing the massive audience into a moment that felt impossibly personal. She sang about holding on to hope when everything said to give up, about finding beauty in the struggle, about being more than the uniform you wore or the job you did. Her grandmother's guitar, old and scarred as it was, seemed to glow under the stage lights, every scratch and dent now looking like a badge of honor rather than a mark of poverty. The final chorus built slowly, Sarah's voice climbing higher with each repetition of the phrase "still here." The audience began to feel it in their chests, that universal ache of wanting to matter, of fighting to be seen. Some people were crying now, not in a manipulated way, but genuinely moved by the honesty of what they were hearing. This wasn't a performance designed to win a competition. This was someone bearing their soul, and it was impossible to look away. When Sarah hit the last chord, she let it ring out long and clear, fading naturally into silence. For a moment, nobody moved. The arena held its collective breath, suspended in the aftermath of something powerful. Sarah kept her eyes closed, her hands still resting on the guitar strings, afraid to face whatever came next. She had given everything she had. If it wasn't enough, at least she would know she had been completely honest. Then the silence shattered. It started with one person standing up in the audience, then another, then entire sections rising to their feet. The applause didn't build gradually but crashed over the arena like a wave, thunderous and sustained. People weren't just clapping politely. They were cheering, some of them openly crying, many of them on their feet in a standing ovation. Sarah's eyes flew open in shock, her hands falling away from the guitar as she tried to process what was happening. At the judges' table, all four were standing. Victoria Stone had her hand over her heart, tears visible even from the stage. David Chin was shaking his head in disbelief, a huge smile on his face. Rachel Morrison was applauding with her hands raised high, her professional composure completely abandoned. And Marcus Webb, the notoriously harsh critic, was standing with everyone else, his arms crossed but his expression transformed. There was no trace of skepticism left, only respect. The host rushed onto the stage, his own eyes glistening as he held up his hands to quiet the crowd. It took almost a full minute for the applause to die down enough for him to speak. "Sarah Martinez, everyone," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That was absolutely extraordinary." The crowd roared again, and Sarah felt her legs go weak. She gripped the guitar neck to steady herself, unable to believe what was happening. This was supposed to be the moment where she got buzzed off, where she slunk away in embarrassment. Instead, thousands of people were cheering for her. Victoria Stone took her microphone first, and the audience quieted to hear what she would say. "Sarah, I have been a judge on this show for 4 years. I have heard hundreds of original songs, thousands of performances. What you just did up there," she paused, seemingly searching for the right words, "that was one of the most authentic, powerful performances I have ever witnessed on this stage. Your voice isn't perfect in a technical sense, but it doesn't need to be. What you have is something far more rare. You have truth. And truth will always beat perfection." David Chin spoke next, leaning forward intently. "I'm going to be honest with you, Sarah. When you walked out here with that guitar, I thought we were about to hear another forgettable original song from someone who wasn't ready. I have never been happier to be completely wrong. What you just shared with us, that song, that performance, it's the kind of thing that changes lives. Not just yours, but everyone who heard it. That's what real artistry is." Rachel Morrison's voice was soft but intense when she spoke. "As a songwriter, I'm always listening for authenticity. Most people hide behind clever wordplay or borrowed emotions. You didn't hide behind anything. Every word of that song came from a real place, and we could all feel it. That bridge, when you opened up and let us really hear you," she shook her head in wonder. "I've been in this industry for 25 years, and moments like that are why I still love music. Thank you for reminding me." Then it was Marcus Webb's turn. The arena went completely silent, everyone remembering his reputation for brutal honesty. He looked at Sarah for a long moment before speaking, his expression unreadable. "Sarah, when you told us you were going to sing an original song, I was prepared to hit my buzzer. I've heard too many mediocre originals from contestants who think writing a song makes them special." He paused, and Sarah felt her heart sink, waiting for the criticism she had expected all along. But then Webb's face softened into something that might have been a smile. "But about 30 seconds into your performance, something happened that rarely happens to me anymore. I forgot I was a judge. I forgot I was supposed to be critically analyzing what you were doing. I stopped being a professional and became just a listener, and what I heard moved me." Webb's voice grew stronger. "That song deserves to be heard by millions of people. And more than that, you deserve to be heard. You've got something real, something that can't be taught or manufactured. Don't you ever let anyone make you feel invisible again." The audience erupted once more, and this time Sarah couldn't hold back her tears. They streamed down her face as she stood there on stage, her grandmother's guitar still in her hands, realizing that her entire life had just changed in the span of 4 minutes. The host approached her with a tissue and a grin. "I think it's safe to say, Sarah Martinez, that you're moving on to the finals." The crowd's response was deafening. Backstage, after the cameras stopped rolling and the audience had filed out, Sarah sat in a small dressing room trying to process what had happened. Her phone had exploded with messages. Marcus had texted her a dozen times, mostly incomprehensible strings of excited emojis. Her manager at the store had called twice, though she couldn't bring herself to listen to the voicemails yet. Social media notifications were flooding in so fast her phone couldn't keep up. Videos of her performance were already being shared thousands of times, with comments from people saying they had cried, that her song had touched something deep inside them, that they finally felt seen. There was a knock on the door, and Rachel Morrison poked her head in. Sarah looked up, startled to see one of the judges seeking her out. Rachel smiled warmly. "Mind if I come in for a minute?" Sarah shook her head, too overwhelmed to speak. Rachel entered and closed the door behind her, taking a seat across from Sarah. She studied the younger woman for a moment before speaking. "You know, in all my years writing songs, I've learned that the best ones always come from pain that's been transformed into something beautiful. That's what you did tonight. You took your struggles and turned them into art that matters." Sarah finally found her voice. "I can't believe any of this is real. This morning I was stocking shelves. Tonight I'm sitting here talking to you. It doesn't make sense." Rachel laughed softly. "The best moments in life rarely do. But I want to tell you something important, something I wish someone had told me when I was starting out." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "What happened tonight, the standing ovation, the praise from the judges, that was all real and you earned every bit of it. But the hard part comes next. Everyone is going to want a piece of you now. Record labels, managers, producers. They're going to try to change you, to smooth out your rough edges and make you more marketable." Sarah listened intently as Rachel continued. "Don't let them. What made that performance powerful was your authenticity, your willingness to be vulnerable and real. The music industry is going to try to package that, to turn you into a product. Fight to keep your voice, the real one, not the one they think will sell." Rachel reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. "I'm going to give you my personal number. When you're ready to talk about your next steps, call me. Not because I want to manage you or produce you, but because I want to help protect what you have. Too many talented people get chewed up by this industry. I don't want that to happen to you." Sarah took the card with trembling hands, reading the simple contact information printed there. "Why are you doing this? Why do you care what happens to me?" Rachel stood up, moving toward the door. "Because 25 years ago, someone did the same thing for me. A songwriter I admired saw something in me and took the time to warn me about the pitfalls ahead. It saved my career and probably my life. Now I'm paying it forward." She paused at the door. "You have something special, Sarah. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise, and don't let anyone take it away from you." After Rachel left, Sarah sat alone with her thoughts for a while longer. Through the walls, she could hear the sounds of the arena being cleaned up, the distant voices of crew members and other contestants. Her guitar sat in its case beside her, the same guitar that had been with her through every lonely night, every quiet moment of doubt. She ran her fingers along the worn case, thinking about how many times she had almost given up on music entirely. If Marcus hadn't found those recordings, if she hadn't agreed to audition, she would still be going through the motions of her life, never knowing what might have been possible. A production assistant appeared to tell her that Marcus was waiting for her outside. Sarah gathered her things and made her way through the maze of corridors to the stage door. When she pushed it open, she found her brother waiting with the biggest smile she had ever seen on his face. He didn't say anything, just pulled her into a fierce hug that lifted her off her feet. When he finally set her down, Sarah saw that he was crying too. "You did it," he whispered. "I knew you could," but seeing it actually happen, his voice broke and he hugged her again. They walked to the parking lot together, Sarah's arm linked through Marcus's, both of them still too emotional to say much. The night air was cool against Sarah's flushed face, and she took deep breaths, trying to ground herself in reality. In just a few hours, everything had changed. She wasn't sure what came next, wasn't sure how to navigate this new world she had suddenly been thrust into. But as she looked at her brother's proud face and thought about the thousands of people who had been moved by her song, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt hope, not the fragile, desperate kind she had been clinging to, but something solid and real. For the first time since her parents died, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her dreams were still possible after all. The next morning, Sarah woke up to discover that her life had transformed overnight. Her phone had died from the constant stream of notifications, and when she plugged it in, it took nearly 20 minutes to process all the messages waiting for her. The video of her performance had been viewed over 2 million times across various platforms. News outlets were calling her the breakout star of the season. Music blogs were analyzing her song, praising its raw honesty and emotional depth. People she hadn't spoken to in years were reaching out to congratulate her. But it was the messages from strangers that affected her most deeply. Hundreds of people had written to tell her that her song had made them cry, that it had given voice to feelings they had never been able to express. A single mother working 3 jobs wrote that Still Here had become her anthem. A retired teacher said the song reminded her why she had spent 40 years in an underpaid, underappreciated profession because she believed in making a difference even when nobody noticed. A college student struggling with depression thanked Sarah for reminding him that being seen and valued was still possible. Sarah sat on her bed, scrolling through message after message, tears streaming down her face as she realized the true impact of what had happened. She hadn't just performed a song. She had connected with people in a way that transcended entertainment. Her truth had resonated with their truth, and in that resonance, something meaningful had been created. This was why her grandmother had given her that guitar all those years ago. This was what music could do when it came from an authentic place. Marcus knocked on her door around noon, carrying coffee and bagels. When she let him in, he was grinning from ear to ear. "Have you checked your work email?" Sarah shook her head, confused. "Why would I check my work email?" Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her a message from the store's corporate office. They wanted to feature her in their employee spotlight program, maybe even use her story in their advertising. Sarah felt a wave of irritation. Of course they did. For years, they had barely acknowledged her existence, and now they wanted to capitalize on her success. But there was another email too, this one from her direct supervisor. It was short and surprisingly kind, congratulating her on her performance and letting her know that if she needed time off to pursue this opportunity, they would work with her on the schedule. Reading between the lines, Sarah understood what wasn't being said. If her music career took off, they wouldn't hold her back. It wasn't exactly a warm farewell, but it was more grace than she had expected from a place that had treated her as replaceable for so long. The real decisions would come later that week, when representatives from 3 different record labels reached out requesting meetings. Rachel Morrison had been right. Everyone wanted a piece of her now, and each one promised they could make her a star. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the attention, unsure how to evaluate these offers or even if she wanted to sign with anyone. The competition finals were still 2 weeks away. Everything was moving so fast that she could barely catch her breath. It was Rachel who helped her navigate those first confusing days. True to her word, she made herself available whenever Sarah called, offering advice without agenda. When Sarah forwarded her the record label offers, Rachel's response was measured and wise. "Don't sign anything until after the finals. Right now you have leverage because everyone wants you. After the competition, win or lose, you'll have even more clarity about what you want. Use this time to figure out who you are as an artist, not who they want you to be." Sarah took that advice to heart. Instead of rushing into meetings and negotiations, she spent the 2 weeks before the finals writing. New songs poured out of her, different from Still Here but carrying the same emotional honesty. She wrote about her parents, about loss and resilience. She wrote about Marcus and the sacrifices he had made to support her. She wrote about her grandmother and the gift of music that had sustained her through the hardest times. Each song felt like a piece of herself she was finally brave enough to share. The production team reached out about her final performance, suggesting she might want to do a popular cover song to appeal to a broader audience. Sarah politely declined. If she was going to the finals, she would perform another original, a new song she had written in the aftermath of her semi-final performance. It was called Gravity, and it was about the weight of other people's expectations versus the lightness of being true to yourself. The producers were hesitant but ultimately agreed, probably calculating that Sarah's authenticity was exactly what had made her a fan favorite in the first place. The night of the finals arrived with a surreal quality that made Sarah feel like she was watching her own life from outside her body. The arena was even more packed than before, the energy almost electric. Other finalists included the dance crew she had seen backstage weeks ago, a ventriloquist who had gone viral, and a singer with a voice so technically perfect it seemed almost inhuman. Sarah knew she was the underdog, the contestant whose success had been unexpected and therefore felt fragile, like it could disappear as quickly as it had appeared. Backstage, she ran into Marcus Webb, who was walking through before the show started. He stopped when he saw her, and to her surprise, he approached with something close to a smile. "Sarah," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind, "I wanted to tell you before you go out there tonight, whatever happens, you've already won something more important than this competition. You've found your voice. Don't lose it chasing trophies or record deals or fame. The moment you start performing for approval instead of truth, you'll lose what made you special." Sarah nodded, understanding the weight of what he was saying. "Thank you for being honest with me," she replied softly. "That night during the semi-finals, you could have destroyed my confidence. But you chose to see something worth encouraging instead." Webb shrugged, looking almost embarrassed by the sentiment. "I've been too harsh on too many people who deserved better. I'm trying to do better." He started to walk away, then turned back. "Also, for what it's worth, I've already voted for you. Don't tell the other judges." He winked and disappeared down the corridor, leaving Sarah speechless. When her name was called, Sarah walked onto that stage for the last time as a competitor. The audience greeted her with enthusiastic applause, many people already on their feet before she had even performed. She could see Marcus in the crowd again, this time with friends he had brought to support her. She could see faces she recognized from social media, people who had connected with her story and traveled to be there in person. And somewhere out there, though she couldn't see them, she knew there were people watching who needed to hear what she was about to say. Sarah sat down with her guitar, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the sea of faces. For a moment, the old fear tried to surface, that voice that said she didn't belong here, that she was just a girl from South Philadelphia who should be grateful for what she had and stop reaching for more. But then she felt the guitar strings under her fingers, solid and real, and she remembered everything that had brought her to this moment. She remembered her grandmother's hands placing this instrument in her arms. She remembered her parents' pride in her music before they were gone. She remembered Marcus believing in her when she had stopped believing in herself. The first chord of Gravity rang out clear and true. Sarah's voice, stronger now than it had been 2 weeks ago, carried across the arena with confidence born not from arrogance but from finally accepting that she had something worth sharing. The song was more up-tempo than Still Here, with a driving rhythm that built momentum through each verse. She sang about the pull of expectations, how they could weigh you down until you forgot how to fly. She sang about breaking free, not in a defiant way, but in a necessary one, like a bird finally trusting its wings. The chorus soared, and Sarah's voice soared with it, reaching notes she had been afraid to attempt before. The audience was completely with her, swaying to the rhythm, many singing along even though they had never heard the song before. The melody was infectious, but it was the message that hooked them. In a world that constantly told people who they should be, Sarah was singing about the courage it took to simply be yourself, and that resonated across every demographic, every background, every life story represented in that arena. As she moved into the bridge, Sarah did something she hadn't planned. She stood up from the stool, guitar still in hand, and stepped closer to the edge of the stage. The spotlight followed her as she sang directly to the audience, her voice filling every corner of the massive space. This wasn't about performing anymore. This was about connection, about reminding everyone listening that they had the power to define themselves, that their worth wasn't determined by what job they did or how much money they made or whether they fit into someone else's expectations. The final chorus exploded with energy, Sarah's voice and guitar working in perfect harmony to drive home the message. When she hit the last note, she let it sustain, her voice strong and sure, before bringing the song to a close with a single, emphatic strum. The arena erupted immediately, the standing ovation even more intense than before. People were cheering, crying, holding up signs with her name. The other finalists backstage watched on monitors, several of them already knowing that they had just witnessed something special, something that would be remembered long after this competition was over. The judges' feedback was unanimous and glowing. Victoria called her performance transcendent. David said she had proven that authenticity would always triumph over manufactured perfection. Rachel told her she was proud to watch Sarah grow so quickly as an artist. And Marcus Webb, true to his word, simply nodded and said, "That's how it's done." The host announced that voting was now open, but everyone in the arena already knew. Sarah Martinez had transformed from an unknown retail worker into something much more significant, a voice for everyone who had ever felt invisible, a reminder that true talent couldn't be suppressed forever, and living proof. That one moment of courage could change everything. The results show came 3 days later, broadcast live from the same arena where Sarah had poured her heart out to 12,000 strangers. She sat backstage in a green room with the other finalists, each of them trying to mask their anxiety with small talk that fooled no one. The dance crew practiced their routines in miniature, their feet tapping nervously against the floor. The ventriloquist held quiet conversations with his dummy, perhaps finding comfort in the familiar banter. The technically perfect singer vocalized softly in the corner, her scales flawless even under pressure. Sarah clutched her grandmother's guitar case, not because she would perform tonight but because it had become her talisman, her connection to everything that had brought her here. Marcus sat beside her, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. The past 3 days had been a blur of interviews and social media attention. Her inbox overflowed with opportunities and requests. But none of it would matter if she didn't win tonight. The prize included a recording contract, a cash award, and perhaps most importantly, validation that her voice deserved to be heard on the biggest stages. A production assistant appeared at the door, clipboard in hand. 5 minutes everyone. Please make your way to the wings. The finalists stood as one, exchanging glances that mixed camaraderie with competition. They had all worked incredibly hard to reach this moment. Only one would leave with the grand prize. Sarah took a deep breath and followed the group toward the stage entrance, her brother's hand squeezing her shoulder as they walked. The arena was packed once again, the energy different tonight because everything hung in the balance. The judges sat at their table, their expressions carefully neutral. The host stood center stage, his practiced smile gleaming under the lights. As the finalists lined up, Sarah found herself standing between the dancer and the singer, her simple dress a stark contrast to their elaborate costumes. She caught sight of Rachel Morrison in the judges section, who gave her an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. The show opened with recap packages of each finalist's journey, their best performances edited together with dramatic music and slow-motion shots. When Sarah's segment played, showing her transformation from nervous contestant to confident performer, the audience cheered loudly. The video ended with her standing ovation from the semi-finals, and Sarah felt her eyes sting with unexpected tears. Seeing her journey compressed into 90 seconds made it feel both surreal and undeniably real. That shy girl who walked onto the stage 3 weeks ago had become someone else entirely. The host began the elimination process, drawing it out with practiced television drama. The ventriloquist was eliminated first, accepting his 4th-place finish with grace. Then came the dancer, whose 3rd-place elimination drew gasps from the crowd who had expected them to place higher. Now only Sarah and the technically perfect singer remained, standing side by side under the spotlight. The host milked the moment for maximum tension, thanking sponsors and teasing the announcement until Sarah thought she might faint from the pressure. In second place, the host finally announced, his voice echoing through the arena, receiving $25,000 and a guaranteed spot on our national tour, we have. He paused, and the silence stretched unbearably. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Emily Richardson. The singer beside Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as the audience applauded. She was gracious in defeat, hugging Sarah tightly before stepping aside. Which means, the host continued, his voice rising with excitement, your winner, receiving $100,000 and a recording contract with Meridian Records, is Sarah Martinez. The words didn't register immediately. Sarah stood frozen as confetti cannons exploded overhead, showering the stage in gold and silver. The audience erupted into deafening cheers. Marcus rushed onto the stage from the wings, lifting her off her feet in a bear hug. The other finalists surrounded her, offering congratulations even as they processed their own disappointment. The judges rose from their table, all four of them applauding. Victoria Stone was crying openly. Marcus Webb actually smiled, a genuine expression of satisfaction at seeing talent properly recognized. Sarah's vision blurred with tears as the reality crashed over her in waves. She had won. Against all odds, the retail worker with the old guitar and the honest songs had won. The host thrust a microphone toward her, asking for her reaction. Sarah struggled to find words adequate to the moment. All she could manage was a choked, "Thank you," before her voice failed completely. She looked out at the crowd, at the thousands of faces celebrating her victory, and felt overwhelmed by gratitude and disbelief in equal measure. The celebration continued around her, but Sarah's mind had already jumped ahead to what came next. The recording contract meant she would finally create the music she had always dreamed of making. The prize money meant Marcus could quit his second job and focus on finishing college. It meant she would never have to choose between her passion and her family's needs again. But more than any of that, it meant her voice had been heard and valued. She was no longer invisible. Backstage after the broadcast ended, Sarah found herself surrounded by well-wishers and industry professionals all vying for her attention. Record label executives wanted to discuss the contract terms. Publicists offered their services for managing her newfound fame. Magazine editors requested interviews. It was overwhelming and exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Rachel Morrison appeared through the crowd like a lifeline, gently extracting Sarah from the chaos and guiding her to a quieter corner. "You need to breathe," Rachel said firmly, her hands on Sarah's shoulders. "This is wonderful and you deserve every bit of it, but you also need to protect yourself. Don't make any decisions tonight. Don't commit to anything until you've had time to think clearly." Sarah nodded gratefully, feeling the weight of expectation already pressing down on her. Rachel continued, her voice softer now. "Remember what I told you about keeping your authenticity. That matters even more now that you've won. Everyone is going to want to shape you into what they think will sell. Fight for your truth." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah signed with Meridian Records after negotiating terms that gave her significant creative control, something Rachel had insisted was non-negotiable. She began working with producers on her debut album, fighting to ensure her songs remained honest rather than commercially sanitized. Some battles she won, others required compromise. But through it all, she held on to the core truth that had brought her here. Authentic emotion would always resonate more deeply than manufactured perfection. Her first single, a studio recording of Still Here, was released 2 months after her competition win. It climbed the charts steadily, not with the explosive trajectory of manufactured pop hits but with the sustained momentum of something genuinely meaningful. People connected with it the way they had connected with her performance, sharing it with friends who were struggling, using it as an anthem for perseverance. The music video featured footage from her days working retail intercut with her competition performances, a visual reminder of the journey she had traveled. 6 months after winning the competition, Sarah performed at a sold-out concert in Philadelphia, her hometown crowd welcoming her back as a conquering hero. Marcus sat in the front row, his pride visible even from the stage. But what moved Sarah most were the faces in the crowd, people of all ages and backgrounds who had come not just to hear music but to be part of something larger. When she played Still Here, thousands of voices sang along with her, each person finding their own meaning in the words she had written in a moment of pain and frustration. Standing on that stage, guitar in hand and her voice stronger than ever, Sarah thought about the scared girl who had almost backed out of her first audition. She thought about every doubt she had overcome, every moment she had chosen courage over fear. The applause washed over her as she finished the song, and Sarah realized something profound. She wasn't just a singer who had won a competition. She had become a voice for everyone who had ever felt invisible, proof that hidden talent could emerge if given the chance, and a living reminder that authenticity would always find its audience. The journey from retail worker to recording artist had been unexpected and improbable. But as Sarah looked out at the crowd of people she had touched with her music, she understood that sometimes the longest detours lead exactly where you need to go. She had found not just success but purpose, not just recognition but connection. And in the end, that mattered more than any trophy or record deal ever could. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.